there, a very warm welcome to the big kickoff. It's the Racing Post's bumper pre-season preview brought to you in partnership with our sponsors SBK. I'm Bruce Millington and in the company of an esteemed panel. We are hoping to furnish you with wise words, top tips and value wagers for the coming 9 months of action. That panel consists of my learned friend Mark Langdon from the Racing Post, also from the Racing Post, James Milton. They have been locked away for the past few weeks, studying all the transfers, all the pre-season friendlies to bring you all the best action, and delighted to be joined as well by professional football punter Nick Goff. Now then, before we get cracking, a big plug for this. It's the big kickoff in paper form. You're looking at it in video form. This is out on Monday. 80 pages crammed with stats, tips, info, all the latest transfers. Do not miss it. It is an absolute belter. So the boys are working hard on that. In the meantime, though, before we get going with all the various individual divisions, I'll bowl you a few looseners just to make sure that you're nice and warm. We'll start with you, Milts. Milts, what's been the best individual piece of transfer business this summer involving a Premier League club?
That's a very good question. I'm gonna go for an obvious one actually, and slightly biased as an Arsenal fan, but yeah, loving to see Arsenal splash out on Declan Rice, who, you know, I mean, for many years we've been looking to fill the void left by Patrick Vieira. Many have attempted it, but I've got high hopes for Declan Rice. Obviously, West Ham will be devastated to see him go, but yeah, Declan Rice for me.
I thought it was the new Granit Xhaka, not the new Vieira. Lofty, okay, no pressure. Nick, which Premier League team's points this coming season will differ most from their points total last season, either in a good or a bad way?
I've got a feeling perhaps Newcastle might take a little bit of a dip this year, being in the Champions League. I think that they probably overachieved a little bit, in part because so many teams underachieved last year. Your Liverpools and your Chelseas won't be so bad again.
I suppose Chelsea would be a short price if there was a market on most varied points differential. Yeah. I was looking at the table. They got less than half the points of Man City last season. That's just mad, isn't it?
Yeah, so the correct answer is obviously Chelsea. But in trying to find something that I think that the market might not be onto, I wonder whether Newcastle playing twice a week, every week in the Champions League, up against teams now like Liverpool and Chelsea, who will definitely be better. Spurs might not be better, but we'll get onto that, I'm sure, at some point.
Excellent.
But I wouldn't be surprised if they miss top 4 and then pressure becomes on Eddie Howe. Do they decide to go down a big manager route, or are they happy with this, trying to build it gradually the way they are? Because that's how they've gone about it, which isn't necessarily in line with what I'd expect. So I thought they wanted everything yesterday, but they've tried to be sort of a bit cleverer about it. But that could be tested for the first time this year.
Excellent, interesting. And Mark, give me 1 or 2 players who perhaps the viewers aren't that familiar with now, but by the end of the season you think they damn well will be. A couple of breakthrough stars.
It's a tough one, Bruce. You thought you was giving us some easy ones
to I'm pitching them in short and whizzing them around your head.
The problem is, it's just sort of like, I feel like everybody knows everything about all the players.
No, we don't. Not everyone's like you. They have lives and they do other things. What about the fella Villa have signed?
But see, I mean, it's like 50 million quid, isn't he, DRB? But I think he is somebody that will do well there for sure. You know, he's a wide player, very tricky. You know, direct. I think you can obviously play him. Unai Emery likes to sort of play like a 4-4-2, and he could play as one of the two up front, or he could play out wide. So I mean, I think he'll do well, but you'd be hoping so. And I actually think maybe Pau Torres from Aston Villa is somebody that's been linked with the Premier League for a long time now, and has finally got his move. Might even be a year or two later than many would have expected. I'm trying to remember the Brighton goalkeeper's name that they've signed from Anderlecht. It might be like because he's a teenage goalkeeper. I did the Europa League and Conference for Stan Sport last season, and I got fed all of the highlights in Australian TV, all of the highlights, and there was one player that stood out, and it was this Dutch Anderlecht goalkeeper, and then Brighton went and signed him. I think it's like Verbruggen,
Typical
maybe.
Brighton, recruiting well,
yeah.
Sickening. Okay, Nick, before we get on to the Premier League, I just want to ask what the summer consists of for a pro football punter. Is it like a pro footballer? Do you go to Mykonos for 3 weeks and live it up and then come back and get into sort of pre-season training? How does it work? Do you kind of refine your numbers and try and get some fresh angles? I'm so fascinated by how you guys live, and talk me through it.
This summer, I made a real conscious effort to do nothing for 6 weeks, because the way the World Cup season was, and they came back within a week of the World Cup final, we're back into the swing of normal football, and there was no break. I felt like I was sort of crawling across the finish line in April and May last year. I was just desperate for it to end. And I wasn't enjoying watching football, probably for the first time in my life. There's another game on Sunday, 2 o'clock, and it's Palace Everton, and I just don't want to watch it. And it's so I made sure I've given myself a big break, and it's worked, because I'm buzzing. I'm mad keen for football to start again. But in May, I wasn't there, and so
the break's done you good.
Oh, 100%, yeah. So I've not done anything on Women's World Cup, any summer stuff, any of the under-21s, anything like that. I've just had a few days at the cricket and a few days at the races, and done nothing.
Lovely stuff. And Mark, tell us about the Saudi talent drain, how that's going to affect things in England, in Europe, not just this season, but what's the end game here?
Well, I think in terms of
Are you concerned?
Yeah, I am concerned. Yeah, I mean, I set the questions for the jury that appears in the Racing Post every Saturday, and some wallies were saying, some of my colleagues saying that it's no problem and it'll blow over. Just don't see it. I mean, they've already taken over golf, so I don't see why they're going to just stop with what they've done here with football. I think in terms of the long game, I would imagine they will look to host Champions League finals and then look to create a competition that involves their teams maybe at the expense of the Champions League, or there is this sort of new Club World Cup thing that's going on, and I can see that maybe becoming a dominating factor, because they're not just they're not only doing it so that the people in Saudi Arabia can watch the games. I think in terms of the short term, I think a lot of the European teams are absolutely delighted because they're skint, and so it gives them another avenue to sell outside of the Premier League. I think the Premier League have got most to lose from this, because they are the number one league in the world at the moment, and you are starting to see some players as we speak, sort of Verratti's being linked with Saudi Arabia. I mean, somebody that completely wasted his career, really. He went to Paris, took all that money and didn't play in a proper league, and now he's...
So which season will we be saying it's the best? Will the Saudi commentators be saying it's the best league in the world?
I don't know if that will take... That could take 20 years.
It'll be more about the
it's more about them, I think, trying to get involved in hosting World Cups, hosting Club World Cups and Champions League.
It's a limit of 8 foreign players per team in the Saudi League at the moment. Now, they might change that in a couple of years' time, but the way it is at the moment, there's a very limited amount of players that can go. So it's not like everyone in the Premier League can just put their hands up and say, get me to Saudi.
Well, they have all put their hands up.
But it won't work for a lot of them at the moment. And some of the teams, there's real haves and have-nots in their league. If they're sponsored by the Royalty or the PIF, they've got unlimited money. But there's 5 or 6 teams that are just owned by normal businessmen at the bottom of the league who've only got 4 foreign players because that's all they can afford. Now, how that's going to change in coming years, we'll wait and see. But as it stands right now, the amount of players that can go there is finite.
Okay, and James, what I wanted to ask you about was time allocations this season, because we saw in the World Cup there was a refreshing new attitude towards stamping down on time wasting by adding 8, 10, 12 minutes on at the end of each half. We came back to Premier League football and they didn't do that, and the reason they gave was that you couldn't play the first bit of the season with the old way of doing it and then the new one a different way, which fair enough. And there was talk in March that they will embrace Kalina's attitude towards this in the Premier League this season. Are you expecting that? And if so, what effect could that have on things like total goals, over-unders, that kind of thing?
I wouldn't hold your breath. I know it's a bugbear of yours, and any football fan.
Oh, it's got to be, isn't it yours? You enjoy people wiping a ball before a throw-in, or a keeper smashing his studs against the post.
You kind of on the odd occasion when your team's down to 10 men and they're holding on, and using all the dark arts to hold on to a 1-goal lead. You kind of enjoy it, but yeah, last season it definitely felt as though it was kind of, just another area of finding a tactical edge, and it got really boring.
And if they do clamp down on it, that might help Nick's opposing Newcastle, because they were the
masters
of it, weren't they? They were very good at it. Okay, let's get stuck into the Premier League now. And if you are a new customer, you can go onto the SBK app, or indeed the Racing Post free bets page, open an account, deposit £10 and get £30. Check the terms and conditions. Here are their latest prices on the Premier League, and not surprisingly, it shows a tale of Man City being the team to beat yet again. But it also shows a really interesting battle in behind, and I'm pretty sure one of the key markets in terms of anti-post this season is going to be the betting without Man City market. Now, if you're not sure about the terminology of these things, betting without Man City is quite simple. If you back, say, Arsenal and they win the league, you win. And if they finish second to Man City, you win as well. So I think that's a really interesting interesting market. That before we look at that, though, it's a simple one. Man City, yes or no? Mark Langdon.
Yes. I don't think it will be quite so simple. I mean, as we speak at the moment...
It wasn't actually that simple last year when you think about it. I looked at the table again, it's only 5 points.
Well,
yeah.
Arsenal were favourites at the start of April, and then they had that run of draws that cost them. But there was also a sense of inevitability.
Well,
they did, because
they won it with 3 games to spare.
Yeah, I mean, they've lost some players, and there might be talk of even more, going. Kyle Walker, as we speak, is being linked away. Gundogan was an important player for them. Mahrez, less so in terms of the starting 11, but added something off the bench. And Haaland played like virtually the whole season. There have been doubts about his kind of fitness going into the last campaign, and they managed to sort of get him through that. So, I don't think it's I wouldn't be sort of lumping on Manchester City, but if you're asking me, who the most likely winners are, and if I was doing a selection, it would be City, because they're the best team with the best resources, with the best manager, and I don't necessarily see the fact that they won the treble last season as being that they're going to take their eye off the ball. I just don't think Guardiola allows that to happen. And you could even argue that now they've got the holy grail of the Champions League out of the way, that doesn't become such a noose around their neck, and they can just play their normal football. I think someone like Phil Foden, for instance, can come in. Barely played last season when you think about his importance to the team, but with Gundogan gone, he might come in. And Grealish got better as last season went on. Stones was arguably the player of the season sort of in the second half of the campaign. So I don't see any reason why they're suddenly going to drop off to the kind of levels where somebody else wins. In the last 6 years, I think their average points is 91. I mean, who else is going to get to 91 points? I just don't see anybody doing that.
Interesting. Milt, are you a backer, a layer or a watcher?
Yeah, I'm probably a watcher, but yeah, I think they are very difficult to oppose. As Mark said, those standards they've set over the past 6 years, they've won it 5 times, and the team who stopped them were Liverpool, who won, I think, 26 of their first 27 games, which is, what you need to be doing. And also, everyone's obsessed with transfers and big names, and obviously the Saudi influence on this summer has dominated it. But I think what Guardiola's done brilliantly is kind of evolve, and players like Stones and Grealish and Akanji and Aki, who at the start of last season you wouldn't have necessarily said were the stars, but they were fantastic. And I think you're looking at multiple trophies again. I mean, they set a very high standard in England and in Europe.
And Nick, back in your old days as a senior trader for one of the biggest bookmakers, it would have been your job to set the odds. Do you think the odds compilers have got it right this season?
I think City are a bit too big, if anything. I think that this season will be the first normal football season since pre-COVID. We had the COVID years, and then even 21-22, there were some COVID postponements, and then a World Cup year. I think going back to a normal year actually helps Man City. If you cast your mind back 12 months, the Community Shield, City and Liverpool, City were on their feet after 70 minutes. They couldn't run.
Haaland was useless, wasn't he?
I don't think Pep did a proper pre-season with them last year, because he knew what was coming and needed them to be fresh post-World Cup. And he almost said to other teams, like, I'll dare you to go and build a lead on us after Christmas and we'll come and catch you. And only Arsenal were able to do it because everyone else flopped. And even then, they went and caught them with relative ease in the end. I take Milt's point that they were favourites in April, but they did have it won with 3 games to go.
And that so-called title decider was one of the most one-sided games you'll ever see the full one.
So if they hit the ground running this year, I just don't think anyone can stay with them, and I do think all teams are improving. I think Arsenal have got better. I think Rice is a great signing, and I think Kai Havertz is an underrated signing. Actually, I think he'll do well there. Liverpool have clearly improved. United not necessarily quite so much for me, but I just don't see to the point about someone getting 90 points. Liverpool have got to prove they can get back to that level, and it's hard to get back to. I'd be surprised if Arsenal with Champions League on the radar this year as well can get close to 90, and I would think City will win it by 6.
By 6. I was just going to ask you each for a number because you're all City fans. So it's City by 6 for Nick. Milts?
8.
I was going to say 8 as well. I suppose the one thing you've got about sort of with a distance is that, I mean, we've done work on it before, that once a team wins the league, they do ease off. So, I think if they wanted to win by 10, they probably could.
And the battle will rage behind them. Not so much runners-up spot because you know there's not much kudos in that. The top 4 will do most of them, but it is, like I said before, a really interesting market. It's an open market. You can see some prices on the screen now. Arsenal favourites from Liverpool. This actually, I think, guys, when this market first went up at the back end of last season, was a lot closer. But I think the Rice transfer has really, really attracted punters, hasn't it? Nick, if Man City do face a danger, who's going to be best of the rest?
I find Arsenal and Liverpool very hard to split, second and third. I still marginally prefer Arsenal over Liverpool. Just I think they're a bit more proven now, and I don't think anything they did last year was any sort of fluke. I just think they're an excellent side now, and actually the way that Arteta's built that squad and got them ready reminds me of the way Klopp did it when he first came to Liverpool, and even now in the way that it's built, and now you add the big money signing. Liverpool did that with Van Dijk and Alisson. They took 3 or 4 years to get ready and then bought the 2 to win the league. And it's like Arsenal have done like doing that right now. So I would actually marginally prefer Arsenal over Liverpool for second, but not sufficiently to get involved necessarily.
Where will Havertz fit in?
I think that he sees him as a striker and will compete with Jesus to start up front. I don't think he's a midfielder.
Every Chelsea fan will be screaming, what are you talking about? Did you not watch last season?
Chelsea get everything wrong though, don't they? So I think he's been badly used at Chelsea. And that's one thing at Chelsea that I imagine Pochettino will be about to change. And that's why they've got such a high upside at Chelsea, because they have got everything wrong for so long. But the players they've got in-house can challenge for top 4 immediately, and Chelsea will be in that race now. They've got a proper manager from day one, I'm pretty sure of that. But I do think they've used players wrongly in the past. It'll be interesting to see how Mason Mount goes at Man United. Can these players come out of Chelsea and just get better? Because they take players from Chelsea, from Brighton, like Cucurella, who looked a good player at Brighton, he falls in a hole at Chelsea. So it's too much of a coincidence that it always happens there, I think.
Yeah. So, Goffey's 1, 2, 3 would be City, Arsenal, Liverpool. James, what about you?
I think I'd just about go Liverpool edging second over Arsenal. I mean, I think Nick's spot on with the way Arsenal have built, and it was a criticism of Arsene Wenger way back that when Arsenal were winning the league, he was reluctant to kind of buy from that power of strength and bring in the real superstars who'd improve the starting 11 instead, not just the squad. And so I think Rice will be huge for Arsenal. Obviously, back in the Champions League is an extra challenge, but I think they had the second youngest average starting lineup in the Premier League.
Get the violins out.
last
Arsenal.
last season. So there's obviously scope for improvement. But I just love the midfield overhaul at Liverpool. I think Alexis McAllister is another fantastic signing. And
what will their 3 be?
Well, I think they're hoping to bring in Lavia as well, aren't they? Who will be the kind of steel and the energy. I mean, McAllister just seems to be able to play anywhere at a very high level, and then Szoboszlai as well will be kind of more attacking minded, and then they've got a host of kind of options in the front 3, even having lost Firmino. So I think Liverpool can kick on. Obviously, they're not in the Champions League, which may help them. I mean, I know the Europa League is very difficult to actually get knocked out of, but I think Klopp will be really focused on getting closer in in the title race.
Do you think he might push Alexander-Arnold into midfield, a la Southgate?
I mean, I think it's definitely another option, isn't it? And so, even if he's kind of nominally starting at right back, I think you, as we've seen, you want him as far away from your own goal as possible, really.
Yeah.
And that's not a criticism. That's because he is so brilliant in a creative sense. So I think that's another option for them. Yeah.
Okay, Mark, take City out of the picture. Who are the teams who are going to dominate?
Yeah, I think it is. I think there is kind of like a free, if you like, and then a gap to the rest. I would just edge towards Liverpool as well. I think I like their squad depth probably better than Arsenal. When Saliba got injured towards the end of the season, I don't think it was this pressure that got to Arsenal. I think it was his injury, and now they've improved kind of the replacement with Timber coming in. But I still think that there's a big drop-off between their best and kind of the rest at Arsenal. And then even in goal, like Ramsdale, I think he's capable of some like amazing saves.
Come on, you're allowed to say he's good now.
No, so he's capable of some amazing saves, but he's not as good as Alisson, is he? And so I just like even with Van Dijk not being the Van Dijk that he was a couple of years ago, I think just prefer Liverpool because of their depth and the fact they're not in the Champions League. And like I say, I think those three will finish like 1, 2, 3. Like very confident on City. 2 and 3 could go either way. Like I say, marginal towards Liverpool, and then I think we've got a reasonable gap. I think to the next best.
Well, that's very handy because that makes the big four market interesting. If the three guys all agree that the big three will be the top three, so here are the prices to finish in the top four. And obviously, as you can see there, if the top three is buttoned up with City, Liverpool and Arsenal in one order or another, that brings in a very competitive eight. Manchester United, you've got Tottenham, you've got Newcastle, Chelsea. How much can they bounce back? And then obviously last season's big improvers, Brighton, Villa, even Brentford potentially will have some fans. Start with you, Mark, then. Who's going to grab that fourth spot?
Well, yeah, first of all, it's worth pointing out, because the Champions League format will change for the season after, there could be likely to be 5 spaces for English teams. It will go on coefficient, and, we know that English teams have been very dominant in
I like
Europe,
that new format, by the way, with the Swiss draw.
Yeah.
I think it's going to make the pre-Christmas element of it really, really interesting.
Yeah.
I'm all for it.
I haven't studied it enough
Big fan.
to be honest. But it does mean that actually there might not be any difference between finishing 2nd and 5th. So that does bring, I think,
when would they know, Mark?
It's going to be during the season. I don't think they've said exactly when it is. So you probably will. There might be a stage where you are aiming for top 4. I would probably say that I think Manchester United are vulnerable purely because until they bring in a striker. I like Rashford out wide. I don't see him as a number 9, and maybe he can score enough goals from out wide to kind of cover the inadequacies they've got in the central forward role. But I just can see some improvers in there, and I think that Chelsea are interesting. Take on board what Nick was saying about now they've got a proper manager in Pochettino. It might not take that much to get a big improvement out of them. They do need to sign midfielders. As it stands, I don't think you can fancy them. But if I can see they need central midfielders, I'm pretty sure that everyone at Chelsea can see that they need them. Jackson's been doing very well in pre-season. I think Nkunku, because he was signed so early, probably there's not that much hype around him, and not everybody does brilliantly when they come out of Leipzig. Timo Werner says hello, but I think Nkunku is different. He's the Bundesliga player of the season. I see him making a difference for them. Mudryk can't be as bad. Again, there's definite talent there. Enzo Fernandez, has had a bit of time to settle in. Reece James hopefully will be fit. They've got a lot of what you would want. I don't like the goalkeeper, Kepa, particularly. But just at the prices, I thought Chelsea were the type of team that Pochettino might be able to get hold of and just get that Eddie Howe-like improvement that we saw from Newcastle.
And didn't they win the league the year after they had that awful season?
Yeah,
under Mourinho?
they finished
10th, I think, didn't they?
and
And then they
won
won
it
the
under
title the
Conte,
next
yeah.
year. So
They basically, they're with Chelsea, like they break every rule sort of going on what you would want from a successful team.
Not FFP. Chelsea lawyers don't worry about that.
Oh yeah, no, I won't go where I was going to go with that. But they sack managers. There's doesn't appear to be a great plan in place, and they can have terrible seasons and then bounce back. So why not again?
Excellent. Nick, who do you think might just grab that 4th place?
I think Chelsea are very interesting. If you look at so James and Chilwell either side played sort of 17, 90s each last season. Get those both fit and they make a huge difference. And all the players Mark mentioned as possible improvers. I just think that Brighton are being overlooked, and I don't think anything that they did last year was a one-season wonder in any way at all. McAllister's gone. There's a chance Caicedo stays because he's 21 years old, and Brighton have set a £100 million top, and I don't think anyone's going to pay it this summer. And we've seen what Bloom will do. If no one pays 100 million, he won't go. I wouldn't be surprised if he stays for another year, and he's such a good player. If you look at the market, price-wise, Brighton are a huge price relative to the others to finish in the top 4. In April, they went off favourites to beat Man United in the FA Cup semi-final. There's no fluke about what they do. They're that good. And if they strengthen in goal, which is one position they needed to, I don't see any reason why they won't be in the top 6 race again as minimum. And if others underperform again, they could. I wouldn't write them off, that's for sure.
And of course, there are top 6 prices as well, so you'd be tempted there as well. You'd be interested in
I think they're worth a second look, top 6.
And I think if Ferguson develops the way that sort of people are expecting him to, it was the one area, wasn't it, where who finishes off the goals? I mean, we don't know how good he is, but all the hype suggests that he could be something really.
And they've brought João Pedro in, who's forgotten a little bit, got overlooked at Watford. I saw him play the friendly against Brentford in America on TV. He's a live wire. He gets a lot of movement. He could fit in. They'll be good again, Brighton.
I thought you'd finish with watching Brentford after what happened to you. If you don't know what I'm talking about, just Google Nick Goff mascot Brentford.
Don't do it.
That was so bizarre. I was at Griffin Park, completely independent of that, and then just saw Nick
didn't know
being walked around Griffin Park. Yeah.
How has this come up today?
Sorry. Milts, what do you make of it? We haven't mentioned Tottenham yet. Can Villa force their way in?
Yeah, I mean, Tottenham obviously so much depends on the Harry Kane situation. Villa, I like the way they've strengthened. I just think they're probably still lacking a little bit of quality up front. I mean, defensively, I think they're going to be as good as anyone in this battle. But it's a bit of a boring selection, but I like the slow and steady progress of Newcastle. And I also wouldn't be surprised if before the end of the transfer window, they might actually bring in a couple more big names. But
2 years ago, you wouldn't have said, "Oh, I know it's boring," but Newcastle in the top 4.
I know this is what we thought, and when the takeover came in, I think everyone was kind of rubbing their hands and saying, "Okay, this could be absolute carnage." But bring in Dan Burn or whoever, and but they were so good defensively. They only lost 5 games last season. I mean, one of those was against Arsenal late on when they could have been 2-0 up inside about 5 minutes. Obviously the Champions League will be a distraction, but I think they've just got that solid foundation. And actually last season, they finished top 4 and had a lot of key attacking injuries at times, and so I think their squad's going to be in better shape. Obviously, the Champions League is an extra challenge, but I think they're building towards that.
Interesting. Okay, that's the top of the table. Let's look at the other end. Relegation. Really, I mean, we were looking at it before we came on air, and there's a clear gap. There's 11 teams really that are in the mix probably for it. Obviously, varying degrees. I mean, Little Luton, fantastic story. Them coming up. You will be overdosing on images of their little away end between now and the season beginning. But it's a great story. Well, it's great to have Luton back in the league. So they're obviously very hot favourites. Sheffield United also well fancied. But beyond that, it's pretty open. So we'll start off with you, Mark. Who are your 3 teams you think are in the most peril? Or maybe not in the most peril, because we know it's going to be Luton and 2 others, but the value. Yeah,
I mean, I don't think Luton are any value, but I mean, their sort of points tally is expected to be around 30. I'd be going under that. I think like mid-20s, 25 points might be where they get to. And it almost feels like they're very sensibly buying a team to be good in the Championship. There's a
trend now, isn't there? You go up, you're realistic, you look at your analytics, your finance director comes in, he says, look, we cannot be going nuts
Yeah,
here.
and
I know Forest did it.
I mean, but Forest have had backing from an owner that has got fairly deep pockets. Luton are doing it very sensibly. I don't see them being sort of laughed at and disgraced, but there's just the quality aspect. I think their physicality might catch a few teams out early doors. I mean, not everybody plays like that in the Premier League now, and Kenilworth Road isn't like most Premier League grounds, as you just alluded to, but there just is a quality gap, and particularly second half of the season, like when the injuries start to bite, that's when I think that it really struggles. I mean, of sort of the bets at sort of the shorter prices, I think Sheffield United, just they haven't got much money either. They've got one or two sort of quality aspects, particularly in the forward areas, but again, I didn't rate the Championship particularly last season. Burnley were good, but I didn't think much of the rest. So I think Sheffield United, if you want to take a short price, they would be the ones. As we speak, in terms of like the bigger, more established teams, I would probably go for your boys, Crystal Palace. If Elise goes and he's been linked with moves away, and you've already got Zaha gone. There's also Gay has been linked as well.
So's Anderson.
And the midfielder as well has been
Doucouré
been linked with Liverpool. So it just feels unsettled. And I know you're a Roy Hodgson fan, but I just think it just lacks imagination, and almost the owners pretty scared of them being able to make their own decision. It's just like, all right, well, we know Hodgson's a safe-ish pair of hands, but I think if you stand still in the Premier League, you normally go backwards, and they would be the ones that, I just worry about, I think.
So do I. Even more so now. Milts, who are your three for the drop?
I mean, I think Luton and Sheffield United are obviously up against it. But the other ones I like are Everton, actually. We've seen that established Premier League clubs, and there's very few who are more established in the top flight than Everton. But you can't keep flirting with it. And it went down to the final day last season, and they were at home against Bournemouth, which was who were already safe, so that worked out for them. But I mean they lost, I think, 10 games at home. They've been hopeless away from home for at least a couple of seasons.
Apart from that win against Brighton.
I don't know if anyone had the 5-1 correct score there, but well done if you picked that one. And I didn't really see any progress after Sean Dyche arrived. It's not particularly scientific assessment, but the squad just looks a bit depressing to me, really.
Do you know what? I must admit, I think if you're looking back through the big kick-off next May and Everton are in the bottom three, you'll look back and you go, blimey, look at the price they were.
Miltz there mentioned flirting is the Danny Baker line. They're not flirting, it's heavy petting. So they have,
I don't know what base they're at, but yeah.
Right, Nick, you could be about to be persona non grata down the East End, couldn't you?
Yeah, so I think everything the boys have said about Luton and Sheffield United is bang on, but I don't think the market takes any chances with these promoted sides, and I wouldn't bet them at the prices. And I look through so many other teams. The team I support, Wolves, are in a bit of trouble at the moment. There's no money to spend. Ruben Neves has gone, the best player. They're going to get to the end of the window, try and clear a few more out, and then try and spend money at the last minute, which doesn't always go well. What Milt said about Everton, they were rubbish last year and nothing's changed, so they'll probably be rubbish again. Palace, the issues. If Forest have got a very bloated squad that need to clear out a lot of those players, they stayed up in the end because they found 11 that were good enough, but they had 20 that weren't. And Fulham, I'd have to mention, because if Mitro goes and be replaced by Raul Jimenez, who's for 2 years now been past his best, the manager could leave at short notice. And to be honest, I thought Fulham, once they last 3 months of the season played at relegation level, or relegation danger level. But the one that I would bring up value-wise at a price is a team who were in the bottom six for 28 of the 38 game weeks last season. They had a manager who was talked about being sacked until 3 games to go. They've sold their best player by an absolute mile. People said that their league form suffered last year because they're playing in Europe. They're playing in Europe again. They've got 100 million burning in a hole in their back pocket from Declan Rice. But West Ham's recruitment can be scattergun, and there's no guarantee they're going to spend it right. And I think they're 3 or 4 times the price of all the other teams I mentioned, and I don't think that's right. I wouldn't be surprised at all if West Ham are in it. Now, if Luton and Sheffield United are as bad as we all think, there might only be one place to go for, and one of those teams we mentioned has a shocker, and you stay up almost by default. if you're Sheffield United get off to a flyer, then suddenly, all three sides stayed up last year. Now, so the trapdoor is there for one of those mid-tier clubs who get off to a bad start. And West Ham, 2 of the last 3 years have been involved in it. And they've got Europa League this year, which, as Milt said, you're in till near the end if you're an English club, almost by default. Wouldn't be surprised if West Ham spent money a bit wrongly. They haven't spent it at all yet.
If Ward-Prowse is the new Declan Rice, how do you see that?
What he does with set pieces is the best in the league, but you've got to have a very specific couple of midfielders alongside him in open play for me. And there's a lot of people saying Souček was basically made to look, a la Petit with Vieira, look a lot better because he was playing alongside Rice. So that's another problem. Yeah, I'm not sure Souček's that good a player, to be honest. And Lavia at Southampton did a hell of a lot of the up and downs for Ward-Prowse. Have West Ham got that player? Not sure.
There's also been rumours that they've brought in a new sort of German, I don't know if it's sporting director or technical director, because they've also got Mark Noble, who's director of football. So they've got a lot of people with a view on transfers. And one of the rumours I heard was that the German guy's been recommending players to Moyes, who's saying no. And he wants players with Premier League experience, which is why I think they've been linked with Ward-Prowse, McTominay, Maguire, etc. But you don't bring in kind of somebody from the Bundesliga to look at things from an analytical way and then decide to start paying loads of money for Premier League experience. They're kind
signing Fellaini for Man United.
Yeah, it feels like quite a confused, and it's not easy. It's not easy to spend 100 million, is it, if you're West Ham? Because there's only a certain calibre of player that wants to come to.
And
to
everybody knows as soon as you come knocking, they're like, okay, it's West Ham, they're minted.
And we haven't spoken about Burnley. We sort of glossed over the fact that, but I just think that what Fulham did last year, like Burnley will be looking to emulate that, and their style of play. Vincent Kompany really did great things there. I feel like they'll be all right, and comfortably, as Nick was sort of saying, they all stayed up last year. Like you would imagine that Burnley are, say, better than Nottingham Forest or what Fulham were last season, at least as good as that.
Yeah, Bournemouth we've not mentioned either.
No, I was going to say, I'm sure there's one team that's...
They weren't far off the price Luton are last year and pulled it off, and they're very smart with their recruitment. Bournemouth.
It's the manager an upgrade. I kind of felt hard done by when Gary O'Neill got biffed, but I have a theory now that the more outraged you are by an unfair sacking, the more it works out better.
Yeah, I've got a feeling this guy's good, and everything they're doing off the pitch, Bournemouth, is pretty smart. That's not to say they can't go down, because obviously they'll be in the battle and can. But I think that they've signed relatively well, and the manager's going to be an upgrade. So
I like them on the Premier League handicap, actually.
Okay, well, we'll come to that. Before we do that, we'll do the Golden Boot. Now, this might be one of those open and shut markets that the lads are all fairly happy to go with the favourite. Here are the latest prices from SBK. Obviously, Erling Haaland is a very, very short favourite. Do you have any thoughts, lads? Maybe there's a kind of each-way alternative to Haaland, or do you just go with Haaland, James?
His goal scoring record over his whole career is impossible to fault, and I felt even the suggestions last season that he might struggle in his first season in the Premier League. I felt those suggestions were a bit half-hearted, just because everyone else has, he's not like everyone else, is he? And as we've mentioned, he's playing for an incredibly dominant side. He had the World Cup off last season, which certainly helped him and City, as Nick mentioned, kind of, they were absolutely peaked at the right time after the World Cup. He is very difficult to oppose. I actually like the look of Nkunku at Chelsea, who, I think Chelsea's top scorer last season got 7 goals. I'm expecting Nkunku to do a bit better than that.
Cheek or
I think
it
was Havertz, I think,
it?
yeah. Probably a couple of penalties in there. Nkunku's Bundesliga record was fantastic. 36 goals in 59 games in his last 2 seasons at Leipzig. Would have been in the French World Cup squad, got injured just before. I think he's a class act, and
it'll be him rather than Jackson, will it? As first pick?
He's likely to play a bit deeper, I think, than Jackson, but I don't think that will affect his return. I think and he could be on penalties as well. He took a few for Leipzig. So.
Okay, Mark, Golden Boot thoughts?
Yeah, well, Haaland was 3-1 this time last year, so nothing's actually changed, is it? We knew he was a good striker. there's Premier League proven now, but I don't think that was ever really in danger. I mean, there was always a threat of him getting injured because at Borussia Dortmund he did suffer from injuries, and I do wonder whether with somebody as good as Julian Alvarez sort of hanging around, like at some stage Guardiola will need to give him minutes, because you wouldn't want to lose a player of that calibre. And if they do get as far in front as what we were sort of saying, maybe he gets sort of the last few weeks off as well. So I'd just go for a couple of massive sort of prices against him, really. One is Saka at 21. Just see more improvement coming from him, and that can only bode well for Arsenal. He was double figures for goals and assists last year. You see wide players now kind of almost get as many goals as sort of centre forwards when they're as good as Saka. He did miss a penalty in pre-season this week, but hopefully that doesn't sort of jock him off the pens. It might do, because Havertz is somebody that will probably fancy his chances, but I'm hoping that Saka stays on there. And I just remember like Gareth Bale, when he just suddenly developed into like the goal scoring phenomenon, and Saka getting the hat trick for England. Like, why can't he do that on a regular basis for Arsenal? And the other one was Son, who shared the Golden Boot season before last, has been in double figures basically every year he's been at Tottenham apart from the first one. He said he was injured back end of last year. Obviously had to play with a face mask as well when his face got smashed up before the World Cup stuff. And Romero came out earlier on in the week and said basically the players hated Conte by the end. So I think there were big reasons as to why there was a dip from them. And if Kane does go, there is also the potential for Son maybe to go and play as a centre forward, and I would imagine be on penalties as well.
And as a Spurs fan, talking either with your head or your heart, you can choose. What do you think Kane will do?
This could age terribly, couldn't it? I suspect if Bayern come up with 100 million, I think he'll go. But I do think they'll have to come up with the 100 million. Is that an okay enough answer?
There's quite a long lag between this being recorded and it coming out. So yeah, I think you bought yourself a bit of time. Nick, have you got any strong thoughts on the Golden Boot?
I think if Haaland plays probably 25 games, that'll be enough for him to win it. I think if you look at the top four in that market last year, Kane could be gone, and Tony will miss the start of the season, a few games. So if you can bet each way, you might need about 18 goals to get a top four place here. And I do think Kai Havertz will be given an opportunity to play up front for Arsenal in a sort of team that play a bit differently to how Chelsea did and play to his strengths. If you look at his record in Germany before he came here, he got 17 in the final non-COVID year before he came over to Chelsea. And he's a big price, potentially someone who could get 17, 18 goals, I think. That's what you're looking for down the list. Someone, if everything drops right, could get you 17, 18 goals to get your place. And he's one that sort of leapt off the page.
I just cannot work that transfer out. It's one of those ones where you kind of think, wow, he was so awful last year, albeit played out of position. They're taking a massive chance here, but your gut feel is it's probably a good move for him.
He was so highly rated, wasn't he, when he came from Germany? And then, as Nick mentioned, you almost have to put a line through some of those players.
You can do, can't you? You can give them a.
There was so much chaos there, wasn't there?
But Arsenal do play very differently to Chelsea. So I mean, some players can suit the way one team plays and not another. That's pretty normal reaction. So yeah, there's social media. You can't just have he could be a good signing.
That's right.
It's either the greatest signing a team's ever seen, or let's laugh at the fact he doesn't score a goal in headers and volleys. Like what happened. So no, I don't see any reason why it would be a terrible signing.
Okay, any other business on the Premier League? We've got the handicap, we've got top 10, bottom 10. Anything else you like? Finish bottom as well, Nick? Anything grab your eye?
I think I'll be on Brighton in quite a lot of markets. The handicap is something I'll probably try to get on them.
When you say I will be, do you mean you are already, or when do you get the kind of shovel out?
So the first wave of stuff I did for the EFL is all done. Premier League, I'd wait a bit longer because we're sitting here talking a lot about Premier League, and most of the deals haven't happened yet. And that's just the nature of the way it's going to be with these summers and how the window is. And I hope one day these windows get changed, and before the start of the season, you're able to bet knowing everything. But it's not like that at the moment, and there is still a lot to happen. It's very difficult to make decisions on teams like Tottenham, for example, when your best players 50-50 effectively to be there. But Brighton are a team in the top 6 market on the handicap that I'm happy to be with again, because I just think there's a little bit of a lack of respect for what they did last year.
Excellent. Well, I know Nick has got some very strong views on the EFL. We'll come to that in a bit. But first, James, anything else on the Prem?
Maybe Villa, actually, in the similar markets as Nick's going for Brighton. I think, since Emery came in last season, I think their points per game was pretty much on a par with United, Manchester United, over the course of the season, who obviously finished third. Now, that's a small sample size, kind of 22 games, I think. But
were they not a little bit of an XG anomaly, did I read somewhere, that they were kind of converting a lot more than they ought to have? I don't want to pour a bucket of water over your carefully constructed case.
I think possibly, but they've also strengthened. We've mentioned Diaby coming in, and they had Diego Carlos, who was out for virtually the whole season, and now Pau Torres as well. So I think they have strengthened over the summer as well.
Mark?
I think the Bournemouth are the sort of team where if the managerial appointment goes badly, that they'll be relegated. But there also means that if it goes well, they are being. I can see big upside in at least going for that. Iraola, did special things at Rayo Vallecano. They always competed against the best teams. If you want to read about him, just Google his name and Sid Lowe. He did a piece on him at the sort of when he was appointed that just laid out really we're looking at a Bielsa type character. Now not all of those appointments come off, but if they do, they're the sort of team that might jump up to 10th, 11th, and when everyone, you go back to Southampton when they appointed Pochettino, and everyone thought Nigel Adkins had been done over, and then it turns out that they got a decent one in, and he'd been someone who was struggling at the wrong end of La Liga, but it was more what the potential in him, and I think a few teams had looked at Iraola and they're signing, but this little old Bournemouth, I think is. I'm not sure it's right. It looks like they've got some analytical thinking behind them with some of the signings they're making, and they went for it in January. It wasn't like this. Gary Neal did well, but it wasn't only him. They spent significant sums to improve, and by the end of the season, I thought they were actually all right. They didn't look like a relegation team to me. So a little bit of improvement, and they might make a mockery of being sort of among the relegation favourites. So I'd rather do it in like a handicap where there's potential big wins rather than say match bets against teams around them, because you can't win enough if you're right.
Excellent. That was the Prem done and dusted. Let's talk about Europe next. Let's start with what is the most competitive of the big four continental leagues. It's Serie A. Here are the latest prices from SBK on the screen. And as you can see, Inter are favourites, but there's a number of teams with what look like realistic chances of winning the Scudetto. Mark, which of them will emerge victorious?
Yeah, I think Inter are deserving favourites at the moment. They were like the XG kings last season. They weren't that far off Napoli, despite the table showing a distance between them, and they reached the Champions League final. So it was one of them weird things where they got a nice draw in the Champions League, but they also seem to just do better in that competition. So I just look around, like Garcia's gone in at Napoli. I would have doubts as to whether he'll be able to do what Spalletti did. Allegri is a self-proclaimed dinosaur, and so I have issues with Juventus. They have brought in Napoli sporting director, but the transfers haven't sort of been forthcoming yet. Milan have spent actually the Tonali money quite well, but they're starting on a low base. When they won the league, that was a surprise, even though they're a big name. Like the year they won it, they weren't expected to win it, and they kind of just fell back to a more normal standard. So I thought that Inter kind of set the standard, if you like, and even without Lukaku, sort of looks like he's not going to go back. They have lost some players, but they've got good money in for the likes of Onana, so I would imagine that they'd be able to replace them.
Does Serie A still hold that little special place in your heart? Because you were from the generation that was young when the Channel 4 started covering it.
Yeah, I do. I mean, like Baggio is probably like one of my first sort of footballing heroes alongside Gaza. It definitely does. And actually, from a betting point of view, it's a really fun league. There's loads of goals in it now. When people talk about, the typical Italian defences, like it's usually by people that haven't watched a game in Italy for like 10 years. So there's a load of goals in it, and it's as you reeled off there, it's a really competitive betting heat, and you can't say that about most of the European leagues these days.
Nick, talking of Europe, you obviously keep your finger on the pulse, but where do you stand on kind of your zest for betting on it?
So my view is very much now that if you specialise in football from a football perspective, you need to keep the amount of leagues that you are all over to a sensible level. And so I don't follow closely. So La Liga, I found got bored. I just got bored of it with the two-team dominance all the time. German football clashes with a lot of the Saturday 2:30 with clashes with English football, so I couldn't follow that. The one league I do love to watch still is Serie A. It's on at great times, Sunday lunchtime, Sunday evenings, and the open nature. It's a high goal league now. It's good fun to watch. And you've got 6 teams at 14-1 or less or something like that for their title this year, which you don't really get anywhere else. So if I could only watch one other European league, it would be Italy by a mile.
So Nick, how does that impact then on your ability to sort of bet Champions League? Do you sort of treat that separately, or are teams kind of just, if they're second in Italy, they're rated X, Y or Z, so you don't need to watch it?
I don't do that much Champions League at the same levels as I would do for domestic football for that reason. I can't be all over every team in the Champions League. Fair play to anyone who thinks they can do that by themselves, but I think it's a bit tough, especially if you're doing English football. There's 92 teams to be on top of. That's enough.
So which teams are in your sort of comfort zone?
You watch enough of Real and Barca. You watch enough of Inter, Napoli last year. I was on Napoli to win it last year, and I thought it was a great bet, and it went to hell like a lot of these Champions League teams, like Atalanta did 2 years before. You find the trendy Italian team, and they take your eye because they're so great to watch.
But the leagues that you say, look, these are the ones I focus on and I bet on, to put bread on the table. Obviously, Premier League.
Yeah, and I do the 3 EFL leagues as well.
Right, and that's enough.
Yeah,
I bet. Yeah. It's all very well the likes of us spraying tips around on this and that, but we get salaries, don't we? We don't have to pay the gas bill based on what happens with a lucky ball hitting the post or going in. But do you have a view on Italy?
Not a view that I would sort of be willing to back myself, really.
Giving you a free £2. Who's it going on?
Inter.
Okay. James, your Serie A thoughts?
Yeah, I think Inter are good favourites for this as well. I think last season, what was impressive was that, with the Champions League semi-final against Milan, and then obviously the Champions League final, that's a great excuse to kind of give it up in Serie A. But they won 7 of their last 8. They won the Coppa Italia the last 2 seasons. They've been really consistent, second, first, second, and third in the last 4 seasons. So I think they're definitely the team to beat. And yeah, plenty of question marks about the chasing pack, I think.
Okay, SBK, as per every other bookmaker, has Bayern Munich extremely short and PSG extremely short in Germany and France. So speak now if you've got anything interesting to say about France or Germany, or otherwise we'll move on to the coin toss in Spain.
Very briefly, without PSG, Strasbourg, you'll have to go a long way down the list to find them, but they've been taken over by Chelsea and it doesn't appear to have impacted on the market. Vieira's gone in as manager. They've spent 30 million already. It sounds like Chelsea are going to use that as their farm and sort of get all their good youngsters and send them there, or they might buy them for Strasbourg and then send them on to Chelsea, or send them via Chelsea to Strasbourg. So they might be one that's completely off the radar. You asked me at the start about transfers. I would say that not many people know that much about Strasbourg or the fact that they've been taken over by Chelsea. So
I know Vieira's gone there.
Yeah, so I think that's the interesting price. But yeah, I'm not a great betting heat. You're right.
Okay, and James, obviously Bayern had the scare of all time last season before it all went wrong for poor old Borussia Dortmund.
Yeah.
Will they be less generous this time in letting their rivals have a squeak?
You'd have thought they'd be a bit more ruthless with, obviously, with Jude Bellingham leaving Dortmund as well. Bayer Leverkusen top 4 finish maybe in there. Xabi Alonso in charge. The rejuvenated Granit Xhaka's back there, and they signed an exciting young striker from Belgium, Victor Boniface, who did well in Europe last season.
Excellent. And I think you've got one in France, haven't you, in the without PSG?
Yeah, I like the look of Rennes, actually, who did the double over PSG last season, winning 2-0 at home and away. and they were terrific at home. I think they won 15 out of 19
Has
at
the
home.
Anglo-Belgian lads got the manager's job
He's
full-time?
sorry, that may be my...
Rem. That's
Oh, sorry,
Rem.
Rem.
Yeah.
Oh, blimey, I've got my Rems and my Rens mixed up there.
Yeah, I
Apologies.
think it's only one of them that does the champagne.
I'm always
Bruce.
doing that.
Yeah, so Ren rather than
Ren, sorry.
Ram.
Okay, right. Excellent. Good stuff. Well, let's look at La Liga now. Real Madrid and Barcelona, obviously top of a 2.5 horse race because, as you can see on screen there, Atletico are on the fringes of the battle. Mark, what do you think will happen there? Lots of changes.
Yeah, I mean, you let prices dictate bets, don't you? And, I don't really see why Real Madrid are sort of favourites over Barcelona. Barcelona won it fair and square last year. Now Mbappe goes to Real Madrid. It's a completely different, market. So, but as we speak, they've got Joselu up front. Unless they sort of stick Vinicius there. Obviously Bellingham.
Are they not interested in Kane?
No, I don't think they are. I think they're interested in Mbappe, but they want him for free, which would be quite nice. Ancelotti's record in leagues is not as good as it should be, given the teams that he's managed. Barcelona, I just thought they won it fair and square last year.
Excellent. Okay, James, what are your thoughts about Spain?
Yeah, I think Barcelona at a slightly bigger price make plenty of appeal. I mean, they won it really well last season. They never seem to have any fit defenders, but never seem to concede any goals. So I think and obviously got a fairly young squad, so I think they can push on. And Real starting life after Karim Benzema has been so significant for them.
So nice to hear someone say Benzema. I've still got Fletcher's Benzema in my head, but thank you to get that off my chest. Nick, are you going to opt out of Spain, or do you have a view one way or the other?
No real view, and then we'll probably want to watch the El Clasico, and it'll be on some channel I haven't got a subscription to, and that'll be my interest in La Liga over again for another year.
Before we move away from Europe and back to the EFL Champions League, obviously City very, very short to retain their title. Have you discovered the sexy Serie A team again this year, Nick?
Not yet. Usually, what you want to do is wait for 4 or 5 league games, and the bookmakers forget to update their Champions League prices.
They do.
That
because happens,
it's not something they're on top of every single day, and it'll take someone asking for a decent bet to realise, something's changed here since we priced it. So you will come across a mistake if you watch the first 4 or 5 games in all the top leagues.
That also goes for the FA Cup, doesn't it, domestically?
Both the cups it can be, yeah.
Worth keeping an eye. So if a team gets off to a flying start and you think it's sustainable, then just check out the League Cup and FA Cup markets round about fireworks night. You might get a little bargain. But Champions League, as things stand, Nick, do you have a strong view?
I think City are very solid favourites to go again. In what's this normal season, as we referred to earlier on, they've easily got the power to go and give it another go. I just don't see how City aren't in a semi-final. And so the price can't be that bad right now. So a boring pick, but I'll be with them.
I just go for them to win the quad. I mean, they've ruined the Champions League now because they're so good, and they go off like short prices. It's hard to find. If you draw Man City in like the quarter final, like Bayern Munich, I thought were, played quite well against Man City, and yet got absolutely tonked.
That's the worry, isn't it? The way they eased past Bayern and then Real Madrid, and you think, well, who is going to stop them?
I do think, though, if you fancy City for the Champions League, you might as well have a go at trebles and quads, because, why not?
Absolutely.
When you find one of these sexy 50-1 shots for the Champions League, you draw City in the quarter-final, you're 50 again.
Yeah. I know.
It's like in tennis when your player gets to the semis and is up against Djokovic or whoever, and they're still the same price as at the start, aren't they?
So you can sense the Champions League fever.
Sorry,
from the
we're
guys.
buzzing.
I'm going to get them revved up now because we're going to look at the EFL, and we'll start with the Championship, which is really, really interesting. Here are the latest prices from SBK. Leicester favourites from Leeds, from Southampton. Will it be the relegated trio that dominate, or a team that was bubbling under last season, or indeed a team that came up? I'm coming to you, Nick, first, because I bumped into you at Lord's about a month ago, and you gave me a tip, and the price has certainly not got any bigger, has it?
So I don't think it was a very strong Championship last year. So I don't find much appeal. Borough and Sunderland were all right, and you can make cases for both of them. But I'd look at the 3 relegated sides and, spoiler, one of the promoted sides from League One. of the relegated sides, what Leicester have managed to do quite helpfully, I think, is lose players early. So you know where you are to a certain extent. But the players they've lost, Maddison, Barnes, Evans, Tielemans, really, really, the real spine of their side. And the players they've brought in, Winks and Cody, it's almost like they're going down the by the names route, which isn't necessarily the way that I go about it if I went down to the Championship. And there was a lot of talk of unrest in the camp at Leicester, and to put that right over one summer is very tricky. So I wouldn't be surprised if Leicester go and win it, but they're not a team that I'd want to be on right now. Southampton, the opposite of Leicester, they've not really lost any of them yet, but they must have 10 players that might well go, and that's a problem to see what they're left with. Again, I wouldn't be surprised if 5 or 6 of them stay, and they've had players out on loan that have come back as well. Your Teller at Burnley, he's proven he can tear up the Championship, so I wouldn't be surprised by them. And equally Leeds with Farke going there, the one that's proved himself at that level. And they've had players out on loan, your Cresswells at Millwall, players like that will come back, and they'll fit in around the top of the Championship. So any of the 3 relegated sides wouldn't surprise me. But I do think when excellent teams come up from League One, they can challenge straight away. We saw about 10 years ago, Southampton came up from League One, won the Championship straight away, and with a really good team. My team, Wolves, were in the League One, won League One about 6 or 7 years ago. They got 74 points the first year back. Somehow missed the playoffs with 74 points on goal difference. But this Ipswich team is comparable with those top League One sides. And in what could be a weak Championship, they tick a lot of boxes because from Christmas onwards, they were one of the best League One teams of all time. The manager's very good, very modern day, good coach. And it's a weakish league, and I really think Ipswich can hit the ground running and challenge for promotion.
Interesting. Ipswich for Nick, who for James?
I think, certainly Ipswich have to be respected, and it'll be fascinating to see how Leicester in particular go. But I think Middlesbrough and Sunderland, last season made the playoffs, and Sunderland at kind of twice the price of Middlesbrough, I think have got a chance. So maybe each way in the title betting or top 6 certainly. I mean they finished top 6 despite having Ross Stewart, who's their key striker, injured for most of the season. I think he scored 10 goals in 11 games and then got injured. So that's how good he was. And lots of emphasis on youth there and lots of creative talent if they hold on to Jack Clark particularly. So I think they could go close again.
We've got a vote for Ipswich, we've got a vote for Sunderland, and we've got a vote for...
Yeah, for Ipswich as well, completely independent of what Nick... But I mean, he sort of covered the areas it covered the areas that I felt show my work.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
So I mean, they look like they're signing quite well. Taylor from Peterborough, was very good in League One last season.
Talking my boy Rex Saki going there on loan.
Yeah, the thing is as well, if you are a Premier League team and you wanted to send, particularly if you're in like the south area and you wanted to send a good one, you would trust McKenna to look after them, and so that there might be some loan business to be done. But the Premier League teams, are relegated ones, I find very difficult to work out for all the reasons that Nick has suggested there. But I think what I like about Ipswich is that I'm not mad on any of those kind of your Championship regulars, if you like Norwich, Watford, West Brom. I really don't like any of them. What West Brom have had a lot of off-field issues. Watford brought in another new manager, probably have another couple before Christmas as well. And Norwich, I know Dan Childs, resident Championship expert, likes Norwich. I don't often disagree with Dan, but I will on this occasion. So I think that it's there for Ipswich as a really highly rated League One team to go, and Sunderland finished top 6 last season, so I think that Ipswich should be. I'd be disappointed if they're not in the playoff picture.
Interesting, very very strong fancies there for 2 of the guys for Ipswich. What other thoughts do you have on the Championship? We'll start with you, Mark. Anyone who might be a handicap bet, perhaps top scorer, a bit of relegation value?
Yeah, so in terms of the relegation, I think I'm always looking for teams that might be about to sort of hit crisis point rather than ability, because I think in the EFL it's normally teams that are poorly run that end up sort of getting dragged into it. And the vibes coming out.
Ideally, so poorly run, they get a deduction.
Yeah,
and
well,
it's
yeah,
all
but
done
it
and
does
dusted.
it does happen, and it will happen probably again this season somewhere along the line. But the Blackburn, the Venkies have been criticised before. They seem to be cutting costs. There was talk about John Dale Thomason leaving. Berriton Diaz has obviously departed and moved to La Liga. The centre half Phillips has been linked with, strongly linked with a move away as well. They're just bad vibes around, and obviously, they were a team wasn't far off the playoffs last season. So ordinarily, you wouldn't have thought they would be in a relegation battle, but they might be the type of team that just has like a crisis, from a financial point of view.
Blackburn for relegation.
And in the top scorer,
Oh, yeah.
I am a sucker for a pre-season sort of hot shot that bangs in loads of goals. And Millwall, Kevin Nisbet, a lovely name for someone who wants to have a punt.
Nisbet, I've got an account with them.
Yeah, so he just looks so sharp in pre-season. You're never quite sure that sort of Scottish level to where they are. But I thought Millwall have obviously had some really sad news with their owner passing away. I'm not sure if that will impact them because they were a team I was looking at potentially making that step up because they weren't far away last year. But yeah, if they go okay again, he might be somebody that does well.
James, some Championship thoughts from you?
Yeah, I fear for QPR in the relegation market. After Christmas, they won once in 20 games and then got a couple of crucial late wins at Burnley and Stoke to keep them up. But it just looks like a kind of small squad, not a great deal of creativity. And if they lose any of their key players before the transfer window slams shut, then they could be in trouble. And with all the Ipswich love, Connor Chaplin, who was joint top scorer last season in League One, 26 goals. He's 26 years old, so should still be improving. Bit of Championship experience with Barnsley a couple of seasons ago, did well, so he's one to consider each
Connor
way.
Chaplin. Okay, Nick, what have you got for us?
So I've sort of thrown my toys out of the pram with EFL relegation bets now. The last straw for me last summer was I backed Cardiff and Huddersfield for relegation, and both at sort of 13 to 2 and 10 respectively, big price relegation bets. Both would have gone down if it wasn't for the points deduction for Wigan and Reading. So I can't be doing this right now. I'd rather wait until the middle of the season to see whether these things are actually, which way these points deductions are going.
It's hard enough looking at the playing staff without having to worry about what's going on in the boardroom or the.
So I'm not getting involved in any EFL relegation markets this season. I've decided that. On a top goal scorer front, I thought an eye-catching signing. So Michael Duff has gone from Barnsley to Swansea to take over from Martin, who's gone to Southampton. Really, really good EFL manager. Duff, and the first thing he did is gone to Blackpool and taken the striker Jerry Yates, who scored quite a few goals for Blackpool. He scored goals all through the leagues coming up. Peak age of 26. They'll play he likes to play 3-5-2, Duff, and he might play up front with Pirro if Pirro leaves. He's actually been linked with Leicester and Leeds, so the chance that he'll go. But I think Yates is the type of striker that Duff fancies to get 20 goals from, and just will improve him and get more out of him. And
he could be the youngest Jerry in the whole of Britain, couldn't he? That's one of those names like Gary. I read that there'll be no more Garys in 2050, apparently. So he could hold the title of the youngest Jerry.
When he burst on the scene at Swindon, I think it was, I assumed he must be like 35.
Coming to the end of his days. Gnarly old striker.
Must have picked him up from the non-league scene or something. He's just a kid.
Excellent.
But yeah, so he'd be on my list. And from the handicap perspective, as Mark was saying, there are a lot of teams with a lot of negativity around them financially, and one team who have had 10 years of that and have come out the other side of it are Birmingham City, who things just finally look to be getting better there, and they could be a team to take a step that, have struggled against relegation for a lot of years, made a few eye-catching signings, more stability off the pitch, could finish top 10 this year, and that'll get you a handicap place.
Excellent. Let's move on to League One now. Here are the latest prices you can see there. We'll go straight in. Milt, who wins League One?
I'm going to go for Bolton, who finished 5th last season, edged out by Barnsley in the playoffs. And I think, we've mentioned how good Ipswich were last season. Also, Plymouth and Sheffield Wednesday were
strong
promoted
League One, wasn't it, last year?
with huge points tallies. So the division looks significantly weaker this season, and so Bolton 5th last season looks pretty good form, I think.
Excellent. Bolton for Milts. Who for you, Nick?
I think Derby, Bolton and Portsmouth have all got very clear claims, but looking at the market, I thought the market had them roughly right. So I've looked for, taking that point that this is so much of a weaker League One than it was, because you've lost Ipswich and Sheffield Wednesday, who were, very highly rated sides at that level, and you're bringing Reading and Wigan down. Wigan start -8, Reading are, big trouble off the pitch. So in that mid-tier, there's 3 teams so Blackpool, the only one that have come down with an element of stability and have brought Neil Critchley back as manager, who got them promoted last time. Oxford United have improved. They were actually not a bad side last year, but they couldn't get it together. And they found themselves in a relegation battle for a lot of the year. And I had them as a top 10 team the whole way through, but they just weren't getting the results. And they've signed quite well. McEachran from MK Dons, and they look like they know what they're doing now. They'll be better. Wycombe Wanderers are really interesting because they became a bit of a Gareth Ainsworth show. He gets all the credit for everything that he had done there, and he left for QPR, but they stayed in the playoff battle till the very end in the hardest League One ever. And I don't see there being a big drop off with them, and they're a fairly big price. So I don't have unlike the other 2 leagues, I don't have a strong view in this league, but there's 3 teams in Blackpool, Wycombe and Oxford who are on my radar.
Excellent, very interesting. Mark, what are your thoughts on League One?
Well, I wish everyone had stopped back in Portsmouth, because they've definitely been a bit of a late sort of summer gamble on them, and I think it can be rewarded. They finished last season really well, 2 defeats in 18, and they were against I think Sheffield Wednesday and Barnsley, certainly 2 teams that were in that top 6 that we've spoken about, was very strong. I think Mousinho, not to be confused with Mourinho, got a very different style, thankfully, for the Pompey fans. They are the sort of team as well, already sold out all their season tickets. If it starts going well at Portsmouth, Fratton Park just becomes like an absolute fortress for them. One of the guys in pre-season, Yengi, who's coming from the A-League, scored a 10-minute hat-trick against Crawley in a 9-1 behind closed doors win. So the Pompey fans are getting quite excited by him. But they've signed quite a lot of players, showed ambition, and I think that bringing Mousinho in when they did has enabled them to kind of get where they want to be in preparation for this campaign. So yeah, I thought Portsmouth, although like I say, that they have been cut, and I'd like them to not be cut anymore.
And if they get off to a bad start, Gary O'Neill comes in.
Well, yeah, that's a fair point. That's a fair point, yeah. Or Harry Redknapp.
Well, yeah, quite, absolutely. Any other business on League One, Mark?
Well, it's very much Alfie May connected. Got 20 goals for Cheltenham last season. So moving to a better team in Charlton, new ownership. I don't see any.
It always works well for Charlton.
Well, yeah, they've had enough new owners recently, but yeah, you would assume if he gets 20 goals for Cheltenham, why would he not get around that mark for Charlton? And on that basis of Cheltenham losing their best player, I thought they were the lively ones for relegation. Fleetwood are the favourites, obviously. A turbulent summer with their owner being sent to prison for 13 years for fraud. So, it's going to be difficult for them. Nick's mentioned Wigan's point deduction, so there might not be many places to play for. But I thought Cheltenham, replacing Alfie May would be difficult.
I think we all know the feeling of a bad Cheltenham, don't we? Okay, let's look at League Two now. And if you've heard this stat a million times before, I make no apologies for repeating it. In the history of the top 5 divisions of English football, the 2 highest ever points totals came last season in the National League, Wrexham and Notts County. Wrexham, obviously the darlings of Netflix and everyone, they're very, very short to go straight through and win League Two. County, bigger price. We'll see who the boys fancy. We'll start with you, Mark.
Well, of those 2, I would probably go.
You can choose whoever you like.
Yeah. Well, I was at the playoff final when Notts went up. They do play great football. I think they'll be up there. But I like another county, Stockport County. I thought they were the best team in the league not to go up last season. They were highly rated. Like if you look at, they started slowly, which is why they didn't get automatic promotion. But they were dominating games and just weren't winning them. And they were, priced up as if they were one of the best teams in the division. I think they were. Then in the playoffs, they had a lot of injuries in the playoffs that sort of held them back. Nick Powell, if he stays fit, is just way too good for League Two. You have got that caveat of will he stay fit, but I think he's a bonus player because they've kept most of what they had from last season. And yes, I think it's actually a good League Two this year. I did like Gillingham sort of last season. I was like, I'm going to back Gillingham, but everybody seems to have been on to
Johnny Williams,
yeah,
the brilliant Johnny Esther.
So you got them, you got the two teams that you mentioned. Salford are still ambitious. Mansfield, I've finally, after about 8 years, I've given up backing. I'm not backing Mansfield.
That's a tip in itself.
Yeah, and even someone like MK Dons, who should be a big fish in sort of League Two standards. But yeah, I just thought Stockport set a decent standard. The question for Wrexham is, what does their team look like in a few weeks' time? Because at the moment, it's hard to know why they are so much shorter if you just look at the playing talent. But maybe they sign 3 or 4 players. They've got the money to do it, haven't they? But yeah, Stockport County, I think, are the ones. Yeah.
Okay, James, what do you make of League Two?
Yeah, I'm going to keep it brief because I think Nick's very keen on this team as well. But yeah, Notts County, one of the great runners-up performances in football history last season. 107 points, 117 goals, and then plenty of entertainment in the playoffs as well. They didn't make it easy for themselves. But I mean, they're were obviously an unbelievably strong side at that level last season. A couple of really classy signings, David McGoldrick and Dan Crowley, who were both excellent in League One last season. So yeah, I think they're certainly sort of top 3 finish and serious title contenders.
Nick's just finished crossing out all his notes there. Anything to add?
Well, we talked about League One being a weaker league this year. It could be the best League Two ever.
Where would you have the overlap there? It's quite interesting, that, isn't it?
So honestly, if you took your Wrexham and your Notts County plus your Stockport and put them in League One, they could probably challenge for top 6 straight away.
Wow.
That's how good they could potentially be. I feel quite sorry for a few League Two managers at clubs whose board and fans expect them to challenge for promotion this year. Because the 3 we've mentioned, the big 3, the Wrexham, Notts and Stockport, then you've got Salford and MK Dons, who, MK Dons weren't one of the worst 4 teams in League One last year, but managed to go down. Stockport were one of the better League Two teams of the last 5 years and lost it in a penalty shootout at Wembley. So I think 5 of the 7 places might well be gone almost before we start. Like these teams could be that good. And you've got your Nigel Clough and your Mark Hughes at Mansfield and Bradford. These are clubs that expect to be in League One minimum for Bradford. I think there's going to be a lot of sackings this year around the middle of League Two, where clubs like your Swindons and people like that who just don't feel they belong in League Two cannot get out this year. Now, if you're a forward-thinking club, you ought to be probably thinking, we'll save some money this year. If you're a Crew or a team like that, if we can just stay up this year and play some kids and
it's a tough one to put in the programme notes, isn't it? Notes from the chairman.
First day of the season.
Thanks for turning up. You needn't have bothered.
We've got no chance this year. But at the prices, I think Notts County are a really, really good bet. They finished at a point behind that final game against Wrexham, the winner takes all type game. Wrexham went off like 6-4, so the market was saying on the neutral ground, Notts County are slightly the better side. Since they've come up, they've made all the eye-catching signings. Wrexham haven't done anything. They've lost Paul Mullin to injury. Now, it's happened early enough that they'll probably go and buy a striker in this talk of Norwood, maybe, and he'll probably come in and score a lot of goals at that level, and they'll probably bring in a load more. If Wrexham go and bring in 6 or 7 quality players and win the league, I'll just shrug my shoulders from here, because the opening prices were 7-2 Wrexham, 10 Notts. And they're the same standard as last year, with McGoldrick coming in, who was Derby's best player in League One. So I think even now, they're not the price they were a month ago, but I think Notts County are probably my strongest bet of the summer.
Wow, that's really, really interesting. Anything else on League Two, Mark?
Well, just in terms of relegation, I mean, Crawley were the hype team this time last year. Their owners are, go about it in a different way, maybe to some others. I don't know if they've given up a bit now, so they might struggle in what, as Nick was saying, is a really hot division. And then just in the top goal scorer market, a team I think actually that have got their heads very much screwed on and might take the Nick approach, Grimsby, who got an owner that is well into his analytics, understands that results, can go up and down. Gave a brilliant interview. I think he wrote a column for the Guardian.
He's really interesting.
Yeah, he's really interesting guy. So I think that Grimsby might be one of them teams that can do quite well this season. Donovan,
a big cup run as well, which sort of sidetracked him last year.
And hopefully has put some cash in the. And one of the players they bought is Donovan Wilson. Now he's 3-figure price in the top goal scorer. I mean, I won't put you off by saying he's never scored goals anywhere he's been, including he came through actually at Wolves. But I just saw Paul Hurst say that he thinks that he's not been played correctly, and that he thinks that he could be a 20-goal-a-season striker. Now, maybe you just say that, but why would they have bought him in the first place if they didn't think he could improve them? So he just because he hasn't scored goals anywhere else, he's like 100 to 1. But if you don't back 100 to 1 shots, you can't back 100 to 1 winners, can you?
I do love working with you guys because most football journalists and most pundits and most analysts they wouldn't have people like this or clubs like this on their radar. The level of expertise we're hearing here is absolutely fantastic. Really enjoying it. James, anything else League Two?
Possibly Crewe for relegation. They finished strongly last season to kind of get into mid-table. Lost a couple of really important players. Rob McDonald was Player of the Year, defender, and forward Dan Agyei, who actually scored 16 of their 48 goals. And he's moved up a division to Leyton Orient. So big outs, as they say. So yeah, Crewe may be in a bit of trouble. Any other business in it?
I don't bet in the relegation market here for the reasons pointed out before, but I worry about Morecambe, who have just come down from League One, and it wouldn't surprise me at all if they're the sort of team that went down twice.
Yeah, but you won't be getting your fingers burnt again by a deduction.
No, they lost to Cole Stockton, who scored all their goals, and I think they're short of money, and they were about 1 million to 1 the year they got promoted out of this league in the first place. I don't really know how they did it.
It's weird, isn't it, that they're not relegation favourites. Yeah. Whatever division they've been in for a decade, they've been relegation favourites. So, yeah.
Bets of the season coming right up. Okay, before we get the lads' best bets of the season, just to let you know that SBK will be offering a free bet builder every Saturday in August for new and existing customers. Just download the SBK app and check the terms and conditions. Right, gents, you've festooned us with loads and loads of selections. It's time to nail you down to... I'm going to give you 2 each. If you were only having 2 anti-post football bets this season, what would they be? Start with you, James Milton.
I really like the look of Lincoln, top half or top 6 in League One. Hard to beat last season. They had 20 draws in the league, which is incredible. They're very good against the top 4 as well, unbeaten in 8 games. 1 at Ipswich, 1 at Plymouth. They obviously went up automatically. But sharpen up their attacking, and I think they could go well.
You pulled that one out your sleeve. I thought I'd mined every last drop of wisdom and knowledge out of all 3 of you.
I was hoping to save the best till last. We'll see.
So just Lincoln. You were allowed 2, but you're just going to go with Lincoln. If you're having a side order?
Liverpool without Man City, I think.
Lovely stuff, Nick.
Okay, so 2 bets. So the one I just think will win. Notts County top 7 finish. It's odds on, but I just can't see them out of the top 7 at all. That's like my banker. And then value-wise, the West Ham relegation at double-figure price. I don't believe it should be that price. So they'd be my 2. One value, 1 nap.
Absolutely. And Mark?
I'm just sort of getting my head around the fact that you're only allowing 2 anti-post bets. I'll do it responsibly, but there'll be more than 2. I'm going to go for Ipswich top 6 finish. We've spoken about them a lot, but they really haven't got to do that much to be a top 6 team in the Championship. And in terms of League One, I don't really like the division this time around. So again, not a huge price here, but I think Portsmouth were to finish in the top 6, and I'd be surprised if Pompey were out of the 6.
Okay, now then, before every single season, with hope in my heart, I do a little multiple, a little each way, lucky 15 or a Yankee, because I just think that if you get it right, it gives you 9 months of pleasure and excitement, invariably disappointment come April or May, but I always do one. So I'm going to tap into the lads' wisdom and knowledge and see what they've got for us. We need a 4-leg life changer combo. Small stakes. Who are we going to have in? I think I'm going to put in, based on what you've said, Notts County and Ipswich. Okay, so we've got Ipswich for the Championship. We've got Notts County for League 2. That's each way.
Well, me and Nick both liked Alfie May for the League 1 Golden Boot. So
can you combine that, or would you start getting into
if it's in a different division? They'll let you do it. And the one thing with Alfie May was he scored 20 for Cheltenham in a bad team and didn't score a single penalty.
Wow.
I think he'll take them at Charlton. So he's going to a better side. So I think they got given 1 penalty all year. He took it and missed it. But he got 20 goals apart from that. So as long as he's on penalties at a better side, to be out of the top 4, I'd be surprised. So I'd have him in.
Right, we've got a Premier League option. It could be a handicap. It could be a top scorer. What do we think?
Man City. Man City the activator.
Man City is an activator.
Yeah, Man City is the activator.
All right, then we'll do that. We've got Man City to win the Premier League. We've got Ipswich to win the Championship. We've got Alfie May to be the League One top scorer, and then we've got Notts County to win League Two. Gents, absolutely marvellous stuff. Thank you very much indeed. Some more details of some free bets coming right up. Okay, I think we are done and dusted. Many thanks to Nick, to James and to Mark. Fantastic stuff from them. Don't forget, Monday, the big kick-off, 80 pages, an absolute must for all football punters. As we always say at the Racing Post, please do bet responsibly, only with money you can't afford to lose. Nick, you've already told us that you're raring to go after your break. How optimistic are you as a pro punter, or are you such a clinical, hard-nosed operator that you don't allow optimism and hope to enter your thought processes?
Yeah, I think you do become immune to... I look forward to the start of the season because like I said, I didn't enjoy the back end of last season. I felt a little bit burnt out for the first time. Maybe that's age. As you start hitting your mid-40s, burnout's a real thing. I used to laugh at people who say, "Oh, I'm a bit tired." We bet on football. How tired can you get? Oh, well, yeah, I am. So I'm really looking forward to it starting again. And I think it being a normal season, no COVID, no World Cup in the middle of it, will help me because I can concentrate. Someone was saying, a friend of mine who bets Serie A was saying last year he had 9 midweek rounds and this season he'd have 3. So if you're doing Champions League and Europa League, things like that, 9 midweek rounds there, 20 odd European ones, you never have a break. And you do need that sometimes. And so it's a sensible, normal year. And if you want to put like your EFL Cup in the bin and just say, I'm not going to worry about those midweeks, you can actually take your wife out and have a meal on a Tuesday night every now and again, which last season just didn't feel like it was possible. Excellent,
good stuff. Romance and victory for Nick Goff. Good luck with everything, good luck with Wolves. James, a quick one. BT Sport has become TNT Sport. Will it be an upgrade, or will we still hear who the host says is the commentary team and go, no?
I'd say, yeah, it sounds like it's could be a progressive outfit to watch this season, but hopefully.
You can say what you really think.
Yeah,
come on, you're not getting a gig on it, so you can say what you really think.
TNT's explosives, isn't it?
Yeah, I know. Well, hopefully get off to an explosive start. Good luck with Arsenal this season. And Mark, you'll need good luck with Tottenham, I dare say. How much are you looking forward to the new season?
Well, that would depend on where Harry Kane is in mid-August.
Arsenal.
Yeah. I am actually really looking forward to the season for basically all the reasons that Nick said. Those midweek rounds, just they really do tire you out because it just means that, like, if you're doing all the back work from, say, the weekend, you have to get it done on Sunday or whatever. Whereas if there's not that midweek round of games, you can, if you want to, can sort of ease up and sort of, and those double game weeks are an absolute killer.
Brilliant. Okay, that is it for us. Thank you so much for joining us on the Big Kickoff. Hope you've enjoyed the show. Don't forget, bet responsibly. Thanks very much to our lovely producers, Sam and also Will. And don't forget, right throughout the season, Racing Post newspaper, racingpost.com for all the best betting advice.